Hey everyone, it's Sunday and time for a new episode of Record Collecting with the Quill. Theme for today, Class of 86. Yes, I'm gonna pick some of my favorite albums from the year 1986 and discuss them further. But before we start, you know the drill, make sure you subscribe, hit that little notice bell and share with your friends. Well, back in 1986, I was 13 years old and it was a really interesting time in music. It was sort of a transitional time. A lot of the more established acts were going for a more commercial sound, but you also had a lot of upcoming bands releasing albums that are seen as classics today. So as I said, it was interesting. A lot of new stuff coming out, and some of these stuff is have aged in a good way, and some of them maybe not. But I'm gonna sort of mix it up a little bit, talk about the more commercial side and some of my those albums that I still enjoy, but also take a closer look at the stuff that was sort of new at the time and sort of interesting. And for a young guy growing up around that time, they brought something new to the scene of hard rock and heavy metal. But starting out with a couple of the more established acts, you have this one. I don't think it was any album was as debated as this one in 1986 among fans. I remember everyone who was into Judas Priest was really disappointed with this one, since they brought synthesizers into the music in a more in a bigger way, which I think around this time, I think the band to blame, it was, you can't say it was solely one band, but I think the success of the ZZ Top album, Eliminator, played a huge part in this, both from the band side of it, but also from the record label side of it. Them sort of bringing keyboards into the blues music and having a huge success, sort of paved the way for these albums. And this one, as I said, was debated among, I remember all my friends saying you can't listen to Judas Priest anymore. That was sort of, they had keyboards on the album. You can't play heavy metal on a synthesizer, to quote Bruce Dickinson. But listening back to this one today, it still has a couple of good songs, but the sound is typical 1986. Same goes for this one. Another band I was really into, and this was debated as well, the Somewhere in Time album. Also, Iron Maiden started to bring in guitar synthesizers into the sound and a more commercial side to it. They even had a sort of couple of hits with Wasted Years and also Stranger in a Strange Land, which brought a more commercial side to Iron Maiden, which I don't think everyone was too pleased with. Still a good album though. The best thing with this one though is the cover artwork. I think I've discussed it before. And another one of the more established acts, sort of going in a more commercial way, was also with the Ultimate Sin, the last album with Jake Lee on guitar. And here we have Ron Nevison producing, had a huge success with Heart, and was sort of the in-demand producer around the time. And this is an album I think as well hasn't aged that good, just because of the sound. There's a couple of really good songs on this one, but the sound is a bit dated. So these three, so I think they sort of paved the way a little bit for the interest in the more aggressive side of music. Both Iron Maiden, Ozzy Osbourne, and Judas Priest were sort of in the early 80s what kids were going for if you wanted something aggressive. But more about that later. You also had newer bands coming up with releasing, two bands especially releasing hugely successful, more commercial rock. This one, our great Europe coming here from Sweden, the Final Countdown album. They had a huge hit with that track, and also Carrie and Rock the Night, and also this one, of course. This one changed a lot of music, the Bon Jovi Slippery When Wet album. I remember I got this for Christmas, and I listened to it quite a lot. You Give Love a Bad Name, you have Living on a Prayer, Wanted, Dead or Alive. A great album. You can't really argue with that. Maybe not be your cup of tea, but it's a good album in a more commercial side of rock music. And of course, you also had the big sort of war going on in 1986 in the rock community between these two. David Lee Roth leaving Van Halen and releasing Eat 'Em and Smile, and you had Van Halen's answer to that, the 5150 album. For me, this is the winner. I got it. I remember I got it when it came out, and this is one of my go-to albums. So it was a huge part of my upbringing. I really like this one, even though listening to it today, I can see there's a bunch of filler tracks on it, but there's still some amazing stuff on it, and I think the match, Sammy Hagar and Eddie Van Halen, was a good pairing. But that's not to say this one is bad. This one is really cool as well, with the star lineup of Steve Vai on guitar. You have Billy Sheehan on bass and Greg Bichonette on drums. But I think what for me makes 5150 the winner is the songwriting. The playing is perfect on both of them, but I think there's stronger songs on the 5150 album. But as I said, this is one side of the scene of 1986, but there was a lot of other cool stuff coming up as well. And as I said, I remember being sort of disappointed with a couple of these albums when they came out. As I said, Iron Maiden I was really into, but I didn't like the commercial side of it. And same goes for Judas Priest and Ozzy as well. And as I said, there was new stuff coming as well, especially from America, but some stuff here in Sweden as well that was really interesting and something new and something fresh and something a lot more raw. Starting out, I think there's a lot of cool stuff coming. One band I think I had to mention, this one. It's sort of an overlooked classic. This was one band I think in classical band that went in the right direction. The Motorhead album, Orgasmatron. One of my favorite Motorhead albums. Sort of weird sounding. I think they I don't know if you could ever say that Motorhead went for more commercial sound, but it's sort of a little bit of a weird drum sound to this, but I like it. It is what it is, but there's some great songs on this one. And you have really the title track, Orgasmatron, is sort of a, I don't know, paving the way for a more industrial kind of hard rock that came later in a way, which I think is really groundbreaking. But a cool album and a band that I think went in the right direction. But then, of course, you also had a lot of cool trash stuff coming from America. This one, for example, the Megadeth album, Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? I remember reading articles about it here in Swedish rock magazines and listening to this album at the record store, and it was something totally new. It was aggressive, and it was sort of a social awareness to it in the lyrics as well. Quite different from all the previous albums. It was all more or less about partying, but this one brought something really different. You also have this one, of course, Master of Puppets with Metallica. I think this was the first Metallica album I heard. I missed out on Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning, but I'm remembering hearing Battery, and sort of this is something totally new, which I thought was really interesting and really cool. And my favorite from 1986, of course, this one, Raining Blood by Slayer. As I said, this was almost sort of, if you could imagine listening to Judas Priest, sort of being a Judas Priest fan in the early 80s and sort of liking the rawness, and then hearing them release Turbo. I could see why some people were going for this instead, because here you have the aggressiveness and sort of the hard rock influences from sort of the early years. And I think this is one of the best albums ever released. It's such a statement in every way. But of course, you also have, I have to mention this one as well because I like it so much. Sort of goes in between those styles in a way. The Queen's Rage Forward, sort of the start of a series of really strong albums. Warning is good as well. But then you have after this one, you have Operation Mindcrime and Empire. And they are sort of more of a progressive way. Sort of, you have, I guess you could say, sort of Rush influences, but they bring some of the heavy metal elements to it. But then also in Sweden, it's sort of matching Europe, but this is an album that maybe wasn't so huge, and I think I mentioned this one before as well, but fantastic album released in 1986 and hugely influential, the Candlemass Dumicus Metallica's album as well, which also was sort of a start of a new scene, the whole doom scene. So as I said, you have the commercial side, and there's some cool stuff there, but you also have sort of a lot of these new upcoming bands. As I said, Metallica, you have Slayer, you have Megadeth releasing some excellent stuff in the year 1986, and I think all those heavier albums were sort of a reaction to the commercial side of music, and I think that's really good whenever you have those elements working together. You get some great music from both sides, and that's at the end of the day really what we want. Great music, isn't it? So as I said, some of my favorite, it was a lot of albums today. I sort of just didn't really dig into any of them, but it is an interesting time in music. 1986. Do you think I've missed anything? Please let me know in the comment section. And what are your favorite albums from the year of 1986? There's a lot of cool stuff. Let me know in the comment section. And also, make sure you follow us on social media. It's the QUILL Sweden, the QUILL Sweden. See you all again next week with the new subject. That's it for now. Cheers.